After a shooting event, our politics generally descend into a contest of knee-jerk reactions. And it's sort of understandable because despite any political differences, we all see horrific violence and families torn apart and innocents robbed of futures and think, it'd be really nice if this didn't happen anymore. We all want less of it. We just have somewhat incompatible views for how to achieve that shared goal. One side seems to believe we can ban our way to peace and prosperity, and the other side says if you get too ban-happy, you will impede upon my right to protect myself and my family and my community the next time such an emergency presents itself. I am openly on the latter side of that debate, but I do think there's a bit of reactionaryism on both sides. We've each heard the arguments. We all have a good sense of what the opposition will say, and so in lieu of actually listening to each other, we often just talk past each other, already convinced at the start of any discussion that the other side is wrong. And that's not necessarily a problem as long as the facts in each individual case don't meaningfully change, because as long as the facts don't really change, we're just having the same debate over and over again. Until the facts do change, even a subtle change can have significant meaning, and with the introduction of new or unusual information, it does actually become important for us to listen to each other rather than immediately dismissing each other. And I think Sunday's shooting in Texas and the reaction to it is one such case. Let's recap the facts of the shooting quickly. On Sunday, 26-year-old Devin Patrick Kelly opened fire on a Baptist church congregation in Sutherland Springs, Texas, killing 26 and wounding 20 more before being shot and pursued by two armed Good Samaritans until Kelly eventually took his own life. Kelly formerly served in the Air Force beginning in 2010, but was court-martialed in 2012 on 2 counts of assault on his wife and infant stepson. He spent a year in military prison, received a demotion to the rank of basic airman, and left the Air Force on a bad conduct discharge in 2014. Not a dishonorable discharge, which would have automatically blocked him from buying a firearm. And although federal law also prohibits the sale of firearms to those convicted on domestic assault charges, Kelly was able to purchase a standard semi-automatic rifle from a San Antonio sporting goods store because of a yet-to-be-fully explained error at the Air Force, who did not report his conviction to the Justice Department. Had they done so, at least in theory, the background check on Kelly would have prevented the sale of the rifle he later used to commit the massacre. And within about 48 hours after the tragedy, the political reaction began. It comes primarily from Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake, who you'll recall is fresh off his sanctimonious Senate floor speech a few weeks ago, in which he described how he will not seek re-election because politics is too mean for him.
It must also be said that I rise today with no small measure of regret. Regret because of the disrepair and destructiveness of our politics. Regret because of the indecency of our discourse. Regret because of the coarseness of our leadership. It is often said that children are watching. When the next generation asks us, why didn't you do something? Why didn't you speak up? What are we going to say?
I guess when the children ask what Jeff Flake did in the face of challenge, he'll tell them he quit. But before Jeff Flake leaves Washington next year to tell his story of heroism to all of Arizona's children, he has at least one legislative item he wants to pursue. On Tuesday, he and Senator Martin Heinrich introduced a proposed bill they are drafting to close what they are calling the, quote, domestic violence loophole, allegedly used in this Sutherland Springs shooting.
Due to this domestic violence loophole, the gunman in this week's tragic shooting in Sutherland Springs was able to obtain a firearm that he ultimately used in this horrific event.
As Flake describes, it's a bill to ensure that military court-martials for domestic violence incidents are properly reported to the Justice Department and entered into the database used to screen people for gun sales. Flake was also tweeting about his new bill and received backlash from a chorus of critics, including Donald Trump Jr., accusing the senator of grandstanding to create new law against something that is already illegal. And countless articles circulated the internet alleging much the same thing. Now, I want to be clear, I am no fan of Jeff Flake. I think he's the most appropriately named senator. He's flaking out of the Senate because of mean words. He is actually from Snowflake, Arizona. You can't make it up. That said, I don't think either side has it exactly right in this case. There's a unique set of facts here, and this story developed in a unique way. And so I think it's important to understand exactly what each side is talking about and what each side has right, as well as some things that we just don't know yet, things that each side is taking for granted without demonstration. Now, to understand exactly what happened in this shooting, we need to understand the relevant legal structure that enabled the shooter to get his weapons. First and foremost, felons are not permitted to buy firearms in the United States per the Gun Control Act of 1968. If you've been convicted of a crime punishable by more than a year in jail, no gun for you. Per the Brady Act of 1993, each federally licensed firearm dealer screens prospective gun buyers for felonies via a background check. Since 1998, those background checks have been conducted using the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check System. In 1996, Congress passed the Lautenberg Amendment, which added those convicted of domestic violence misdemeanors to the list of those ineligible for firearms purchase, also screened via background checks. And per the 2007 NICS Improvement Act, federal and state jurisdictions are required to report both felony and domestic violence misdemeanor records to the FBI to maintain an accurate background check database. Okay, so based on those laws, it seems pretty clear that Kelly, our shooter in this Texas case, should not have been able to buy a gun. We know that he beat his wife and his stepson. We know that he was convicted on those charges. Federal law should have blocked him from buying that rifle and those handguns, right? That is where it gets complicated and at least partially ambiguous. The military operates under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, its own set of laws and its own legal system. Under those laws, there isn't a distinction between felonies and misdemeanors, and there isn't a distinction for domestic assault. There's just plain old assault under Article 128, the law under which Kelly was charged and convicted. Kelly's crime was functionally what would be a misdemeanor conviction in a state jurisdiction, a crime punishable by up to 1 year in prison, a year in prison that Kelly indeed served. And because the military doesn't make a distinction between domestic assault and assault generally, Kelly's conviction was functionally a misdemeanor assault conviction generally, meaning it's not actually clear that conviction would have blocked a gun sale, because Kelly wasn't convicted of a felony, and he wasn't convicted of a domestic assault misdemeanor either. Now, there is some clarification about this apparent disconnect in the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms FAQ on the issue, which says that a conviction for assault may qualify as a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, which would block a gun sale, even if the offense is not designated as a domestic violence assault, implying that the crime need only meet the definition that exists in federal law, which is physical force against a spouse or cohabitating parties. It would appear that would make Kelly's conviction a qualifying conviction to block a gun sale, but the ATF's FAQ says only the conviction may qualify, not that it must. Additionally, the Pentagon has a formal policy in place that directs the reporting of records for personnel court-martialed on assault charges generally, but it's not entirely clear who would make the call on what qualifies for domestic assault if the charge is not domestic assault. Is it the Defense Department? Is it the FBI? The spirit of the law is pretty clear here. Domestic abusers aren't supposed to be able to buy guns, but the application of the law in the military context isn't necessarily clear. Someone apparently messed up, but who and how and why are yet to be explained. And that ambiguity is why there is now investigation. On Thursday, the Secretary of the Air Force said that records of Kelly's conviction should have been reported to the Justice Department.
The offenses for which the shooter in Texas was court-martialed should have been reported. And that's why we launched a full-scale review of this case and all others like it. We are looking at all of our databases, and if we have problems that we find, we'll fix them.
However, she did not say why the conviction was not reported. She said simply that answering that question will be the objective of an investigation. The Pentagon's Inspector General is also investigating and presumably will assess whether this is some sort of unique Air Force problem or a problem across the military and the Department of Defense generally. If you made it this far, thanks for sticking with me through the technicalities. This case is deep in the weeds, and we're lacking some key information, which is why I think it's difficult to say who's right and who's wrong on the politics, but I can make a case for and against either side. For Senator Flake, he's right that there is ambiguity in the law, making it unclear how domestic violence cases in the military are treated in the context of background checks for firearm purchases. However, I think it's fair to criticize him for immediately jumping to a legislative solution when, as of yet, we don't have answers from the Pentagon or the Air Force about what exactly happened here. If there is existing policy and protocol that was not properly followed, then Flake's law is duplicative and meaningless. For critics of Senator Flake, they are absolutely right that, broadly speaking, domestic abusers cannot legally buy firearms under federal law, and state and federal jurisdictions are supposed to be reporting convicted domestic abusers to the FBI. However, I think they're too quick to say this was simply a case of clerical error and to dismiss Flake's law as simple duplication. It could be, but we've not seen that demonstrated. To the extent the military does not charge or convict for domestic violence specifically, domestic assault in the military context might not necessarily block a person from a legal firearm purchase. But you'll notice my criticism of each side is essentially the same thing. Each side is taking certain facts for granted before those facts have been demonstrated. What we all need first before reacting is findings from the Air Force and Pentagon investigations. If the finding is simple clerical error, then all we need is better practices in-house at the Pentagon. If the finding is statutory ambiguity, a disconnect between military law and civilian law, then perhaps we do need statutory clarification, and a new law would help to achieve that. All things considered, this entire video is another difficult exercise in a principle we should all be observing anyhow. Facts first, opinion later. And in the absence of facts, it's fine to form a tentative opinion, but we need to be honest about what we don't know. And in this case, both sides aren't admitting to those blind spots. I suspect in the end, one side will come out more right than the other, but we shouldn't want to be right based on luck or guessing. We want to be right because we correctly process information and don't leap to conclusions when information is lacking. What we want is truth-seeking, not political posturing. Wishful thinking, I know, but keep an eye on this case. It'll be interesting to see where exactly the actual error lies. Thanks as always for listening and for supporting this channel. Always appreciate that thoughtful discussion down below, and especially over on Twitter. That is at ML Christiansen. You're always welcome to come hang out and chat in my live streams. Those are linked down in the description. Looking forward to it. Okay, bye.